Welcome to OCL Soundwaves. Before mobile personal devices, before iPads, before laptops and desktops, there was the typewriter, an intricate mechanical configuration that was written communications coin of the realm for more than a century. After his first experience with one, Ian McAndrew of Lacey Township grew from being a casual collector to a repair expert, and along the way grew a cottage industry within the lively worldwide market that revolves around the machines. The fruits of Ian's labors can be seen at the Ocean County Library Barnegat branch throughout October. We recently caught up with Ian. Here's that discussion.
Okay, so first question is the shortest one and the most obvious one to me. Why typewriters out of everything in the world? It could have been mix masters, it could have been cameras, it could have been wristwatches. How did it come into typewriters?
I'd be a liar if I said this was the first thing I've tried to pick up. Much to my wife and family's chagrin, I'm the type of person that always has to have at least one hobby going in the background. I got a very busy mind, so it stands to reason that keeping my hands equally busy will keep my mind at bay. And this just happened to be the latest stop in sort of a long series of, the hobby road trip. But this is the one that really ended up kind of speaking to me and sticking with me to the point of really making it part of, my life. Honestly, it was probably the same reason that most folks come to me looking for their first typewriter, is that the idea has been so heavily romanticized in fiction novels or movies, or, just the idea, or, someone who's looking to break into journalism. Well, if I really want to be that old kind of hard-boiled, journalist, I'm probably going to need a typewriter. And so it's always, to me, it seems like the main theme is that it is, for people's first, it's always born of some sort of traditional fiction-born romanticism. Not only am I, the leader of the club, I'm also a member. That's why I bought my first one. I wanted something that, not so much, I wasn't one looking to tinker with it at first. I just wanted something that I could sit down and write with. I hadn't written in a very, very long time, and I felt like, this is something that's really piquing my interest. I want to try and get a typewriter and type on it, having no idea if they were still, plentiful or abundant, or, if most of them still worked or not. So I went on Facebook Marketplace, which is the way that people do things nowadays, and I found one in town for $35, and I bought it, brought it home, and immediately, thankfully the ribbon wasn't too dry. I was able to get some nice impressions on a piece of paper, and I just started writing. And 5 minutes turned into an hour turned into 2 hours, 2 hours turned into, close it, it's dinner time. And, and from there it was I just got obsessed with the idea of going back and writing. Because once I kind of learned, it's completely different from sitting down at a laptop, which is what I think people are looking for. But we've been so conditioned by modern day computers that basically all it takes is, breathing the wrong way on a keyboard and you've accidentally pushed a button. Really you just kind of hover and whisper your fingers over modern keyboards. And it's almost seen as rude to go into a coffee shop and really kind of hammer on your keyboard. People think there's something wrong with you. That's where we've gotten to this point with typing, is that it's almost sanitized. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. That it is this quiet sort of procedure that we do that's expected of us in our day-to-day functions and working. And it's really kind of stripped the life and soul out of it. And the one thing that sitting down in front of a typewriter is going to teach you is that there is sort of a catharsis that comes with, it's almost like, I think it was Hemingway that said that, writing is easy. You just sit down at a typewriter and bleed. And essentially, it is sort of like bloodletting, in that in order to get what is upstairs onto paper, it takes a certain amount of effort. And by the end of like a real typing session, before you've gotten sort of the practice and the mechanics of the machine down to where you can tune it to where you're comfortable at, as a complete novice, when you sit down, you're gonna feel it if you're doing it right at the end. Because you have to hit each key with true intention, because that's the way the mechanics of the machine work. You have to give it each key a certain amount of tension and pressure in order for it to rise up, pass through the ribbon vibrator, to pass through the forks, to hit the ribbon itself, and then make a clean impression on the page. But there also has to be enough pressure when you hit that key for it to bounce back and come back to its resting position. So all said and done, when you write something, you have to write it with intention. You got to mean it in order for it to show up even on the page. And a lot of people, that's sort of their first hurdle when they sit down in front of a machine.
So an electronic keyboard is kind of like isometrics. and a manual keyboard is kind of like your own little Planet Fitness.
That's it.
Finger.
That's it. I mean, you're sitting at the bench, you're pushing steel plates on the bar, and you're giving it a full-on workout. Absolutely. You know, and I think it is that sort of that intention, that sitting down, especially nowadays, because you can talk into your phone and it'll transcribe everything you want it to transcribe. Which is a blessing and a curse, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then the other half with being able to do that, or sitting at a keyboard and, you know, quietly whispering on it, is, you know, I think there's a real detriment, a loss to the creative process in that, because you could put something down on the screen and reread it and say, you know, I don't like that. Nobody needs to see that. That doesn't need to hit the light of day. Highlight, delete. It's gone forever. Mm-hmm. We're all our own harshest critics, right? Okay, so maybe what you just wrote didn't apply to what you were trying to write this time. But the best thing about doing it on a typewriter is you bang it out, you look at it, you go, no, this is not for me. But you take that page and you stick it in a drawer. You revisit it a couple weeks later. If it's still not for you, stick it back in the drawer. Come back another, month, whatever your process is where you're going to revisit things, come back and revisit it. And maybe one of those times you're going to find, this wasn't half bad. I don't know why. Why did I not like this at the time? But think about it. We can look at pictures of ourselves. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to speak for you, but I'll speak for me. I can look at a picture of myself from 10 years ago, and I can remember the feelings that come with having taken that picture at that time. Took it, looked at it. Oh God, that's awful. Just file it away somewhere deep, dark in Facebook, and it'll only come up every 1 or 2 years to remind me and haunt me. But then you get 10 years past it, and that little memory pops up, and you're like, I look good. Why did I think that I didn't look good there? And I think the same goes for, the creative process and your writing.
One thing that I read about you, one quote that I'm going to paraphrase.
Sure.
Now, but it alluded to the sensation of totally unplugging and being one-on-one with the paper that's rolled up there in the platen and the machine, and blocking out all the externals. Mm-hmm. Now, there's also the contrary argument, which is, well, if I'm at the keyboard and I'm plugged into the web, I've got everything right there, and if I need to refer to it, I don't have to do anything else. But describe to me the sensation of that isolation, mm-hmm. and focusing in on what your intention is and carrying it out without the outside interference.
Interference is a good word. I also like the word influence. Okay, if we're sitting down in front of a typewriter, and your phone's off, even this, look, this connects to my phone. You know what I mean? Like, I've got it because one of my kids' school might call. We're always connected. But there are times when I'm in my workshop and I'm working, or in those rare little pieces of time now that I can find where I can actually write, it all goes off. It all goes off. Maybe I'll put some music on, but I'll turn all my notifications off. I don't want to hear, even with music. The hard thing is, you are influenced by all of these different, inputs, these things that are looking to reach you. And unfortunately nowadays, even with things like music, something as simple as that, there's still an attempt to influence you to, if you've got free Spotify, guess what? You've got free Spotify, you've got ads coming at you. And even just the art that you're taking in at that time, the art form of music, if you're listening to something with lyrics, you're being influenced by whatever's coming in, consciously or subconsciously. And I think that there is something to, and even, so we're 2 years into this whole pandemic now, no one really wants to be alone with their thoughts at this point. That time has passed. That was 6 months in. We're beyond being alone with our thoughts. But if you are a person who is of a mind that this is a thing that I want to tackle, and I want to embrace authenticity, I want to embrace my own creative process, and I want to do this without subconsciously being influenced by outside factors, things like algorithms and all these other things that are employed by social media, it's hard to even escape. You don't know necessarily that you're being influenced, because now the grift is that they take people who were once legitimate sources of information, and now on the sly they're making money pitching whatever it is they're pitching. And of course now they have to say it on there. But even still, if this is someone that you've come to trust over a certain amount of time, now you're being influenced by the fact that they're being paid to push something. Mm-hmm. So I think when you are able, if you're able to do it, if you're in a position where all my devices are off or out of the room or whatever it is, and I'm locked in and I'm locked away, and now I have to confront whatever it is I'm looking to confront. If I'm looking just to be creative, you put it on the page. It's not always going to, what's going to come back at you isn't always going to be great, but it's not something that you're just inherently born with. I think that creativity is a skill that needs to be honed. For some people, it's a great big energy that needs to find its direction to flow in. I'm that type of person. My wife has told me that since day one. You're a big ball of energy, but you need someone or something to be able to focus you in the right direction. And I think that if you can commit to something like this, then you absolutely should. And I think that there's a real value in the takeaway of being able to accept, all right, I just spent an hour or two by myself, without digital distraction. Here's what I came up with, right? Okay, you sat at a typewriter. You're not going to come out the other end, some sort of fantastic writer. But hopefully on the other end of it, what comes out is authentically you. And from that point, you can sharpen and hone and continue to do that without all these these time sucks, these things that want your attention, they want your time, they want your money, whatever it is. That typewriter doesn't want that. That typewriter doesn't want anything other than to not sit and collect dust and rust and become, the relic it was before, I plucked it out of wherever I plucked it out of, It really just wants to be a vessel. How great is that?
How great is that? We've been talking a lot about the creative process, mm-hmm. and that end of the typewriter. I need to get to the Ian McAndrew who is lifting up the hood and getting inside the guts of this painting.
Fair.
And find out, when did it become apparent to you that there was a demand that you could fill with this skill that you trained yourself to do?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there isn't a lot of resources currently where, you could go and get a formal education on this. The folks who did benefit from those more formal educations when they were available, they're few and far between these days. And, so you have to have someone who's willing to pass on that skill, which is very difficult to find. Other than that, you have to, thankfully there are resources available online, and I hate to pitch it as a positive thing, but if you go on Facebook, there are groups of collectors turned, amateur tinkerers and mechanics, and that's pretty much where everybody starts. Everybody starts there, and you kind of get a feel for, you've already taken a journey up to that point. Let me clarify that. You don't get the idea of getting a typewriter and go right there. What happens is you've already got too many typewriters, and you have to figure out how to fix the broken ones that you have to either A, gift, or B, sell, or, have to just enjoy, and type with, instead of just having in some cases, a
Or to
30-pound
place on a
paperwork.
display
Or to-
case in the
exactly,
Bible.
right, to share with other people. And that's kind of where things started for me was, the very first typewriter that I got off Marketplace that I mentioned earlier, I fell in love with typing. I didn't necessarily fall in love with the machine. So there's got to be another one out there that I will fall in love with. And thankfully, on my second purchase, that was the one that sealed the deal for me, where I was like, I knew that I really liked typing, but now I found a machine that speaks to me in every single way. Is it the most perfect, absolute, mechanically, brilliant machine that's ever been created? No. I'm self-aware enough to know that it's got its own little, inherent flaws and things like that. But it is perfect for me. And I want to take that feeling of falling in love with typing, and then finding the right typewriter to complement that love and make it a complete thing. I want to try and distill that feeling and share that with anybody who's willing. I'm not going to be like, I want to share it with everybody. Because there are just some people who are like, I don't care, man, I got my iPhone and I dig what's going on with that, But anybody who's willing, I absolutely want to be able to use it as a platform to share with other folks. That's why I've been fortunate enough to have a very good friend that I've turned into an absolute typewriter nut. She owns a business in Asbury Park. And back in 2019, I did my very first type-in event with her through her business on Cookman Ave. And I think I went way overboard because I didn't know what to expect. So I probably had 30 machines with me. I brought like stationery and envelopes and you name it, there was a creative endeavor to do there. And it was great. Probably as many people showed up as there were typewriters throughout the entirety of the night, but it didn't matter because they all stayed. Mm-hmm. One or two filtered in and out, but the people that sat down, you could watch them doing the same thing that I, the process that I described of, okay, I know that I like typing, let's find the one that makes me, love it as a complete thing. So you'd see them type a little, get up, move to the next one, and so on and so on. Sort of like speed dating for typewriters. Mm-hmm. And once you could tell, they just locked in because they sat at one machine and typed for the rest of the night. And one of the things that we do with these events is you are free to bring your own medium to type on. You can type on whatever we provide. It doesn't matter. You can leave what you've typed. Some people like to do a little game where it's create a story sentence by sentence. So one typist will sit down, hammer out a sentence, move on to the next machine. Somebody else will tag in. And, before you know it, you've got a paragraph of this story written by, 5-6 different people. It's really neat. And then other people, and it's those ones that are usually locked into one machine for an extended period of time. When it's time for them to go, they take their paper, fold it neatly, put it in their coat pocket or whatever, and they're out. Maybe they'll say thank you, goodbye, but that's it. And I almost love that as much as the people who leave little interesting tidbits behind, because what that tells me is A, they've enjoyed their experience immensely. It wasn't a throwaway thing for them. B, what they wrote very intentionally, and it clearly meant something to them, that they wanted it to carry off. Both of those experiences are very fulfilling to me. I love that. And if I can sell them the right typewriter on top of that, perfect. But when I do the type-ins, that's like a byproduct of the type-in. Mm-hmm. The type-in isn't like a means to just sell machines. I really like the community aspect of it. If there's collaboration and different, like I was saying about the stories, I love everything about getting creative people in one place and letting whatever happens next happen. And back in early July, we did a type out because of COVID, and that was actually on Cookman Ave, and that was fantastic because people were just walking by, and people either came because they saw it online or they were just walking by, and stuff starts popping up all around us because the street is shut down. So you've got people that are typing and people that are asking questions and people that are talking with one another, kind of trading off little bits of their experience with one another. And then out of nowhere, somebody broke out chalk. Now there are these passersby turned into chalk artists who are drawing these enormous murals on the ground. And it was just really cool. Not to sound pandering here, but that's kind of the thing that I'd love to see happen with the modern day library. It just becomes sort of a community meeting place for art and culture and collaboration. I think that would be a really neat thing to happen out of the other end of this whole pandemic.
Well, that's our goal.
That's it, right?
Now let me ask you about Iron Fox.
Sure.
Did Iron Fox Typewriters emerge out of a need that you were filling, or had you started it and then found the market to fit it into? Which came first, Iron Fox or the egg?
That's a very difficult question to ask. So I mean, I can give you a chronological order of the way things happened, which is that, kind of like I was describing before, I got to the point where I didn't stop at that second typewriter. What else is out there? I kept buying more, and because I don't know exactly what I'm looking at that point, some of them are broken. Some of them are missing pieces. I didn't realize that they were missing because, machines were made very differently from one another. There are some things that can carry over from one thing to another, but then you get thrown a wild card that is just mechanically and just designed completely different. And so that's when I started going to the Facebook groups, and I'm like, all right, well, I want to keep buying typewriters because you never know what you're going to find. I really love the history behind them. I love when I can source a typewriter from someone and the story comes with it. Recently, probably the last 4 acquisitions that I made all came off the back of the Lacey Patch article, and they were all hand-me-downs. And some people don't see the generational wealth in that, and that's fine because it's just, again, not for everybody. It's not everybody's cup of tea. And some people were like, I just don't know what to do with it. I would love to see it kind of restored to when my, grandfather, when I used to watch my grandfather type on it. And so when I get cases like those, I love to get the family history behind it because that gives me, that brings into sharper focus just overall what this machine meant to somebody. How was this used? And sort of what is the energy that is attached to it? Is this a machine that was primarily just a business machine? Somebody came in, clocked out, and that's it. Is this somebody that, this was used for family correspondence? And it's really neat because it puts almost a personality to it, if that makes sense. Not that, I'm not saying it's probably the most mentally healthy thing to go putting personalities to inanimate objects, but we've all got our thing, right? So basically I had just accumulated too many. And I'm like, I need to start, I want to be able to get more, but I got to get rid of some of these. I just don't have the room for them. So I was like, I had a bright idea. I am going to be like anachronistic Santa, and I'm going to gift these to friends and family and, acquaintances who I think will be really into this. And I did that with a few machines, and a couple of them were very grateful and used them, and a couple of them were like, hey, buddy, thanks. This is something. And so I took the hint, and I'm like, well, clearly there's a market for this outside of this. I'm not looking to make a ton of money because I'm learning. Essentially, if I can just fund being able to buy more typewriters, okay, cool. So that's what I did at first, and I did. I found a market through Instagram, and I had also very early on established the website because I had run 3 other businesses before this, and I was already familiar with the platform of building a website, especially an e-commerce website and all the rest of that. So that all kind of came hand in hand, and people really started responding to what I was doing, and I was like, all right, well, what else can I do with this? Because this is all well and good, but and then it came to a point where I was like, I can do can do something else, particularly when, in the beginning of the pandemic, when most of the rest of America started waking up to what was happening in the greater parts of America, to people that not all of us share similar experiences with. And so I decided that I wanted to try and branch out and do something for, writers in like the communities of color. And so I started just kind of reaching out to that community, and at one point I did a month's worth of giveaways with no strings attached. You know what I mean? Dear, BIPOC writers. If you've ever been interested, in having the experience of writing on a typewriter, contact me. I probably gave away, all said and done, 14 machines. I paid shipping, I did all the service on them, and I sent them. This is not a matter of, I don't need proofs of purchase. I don't need anyone to give me your lineage. If you claim, hey, I am, a BIPOC writer, guess what? You're in the club. And I did that for as long as I sustainably could, because a lot of the feedback that I was getting from all of these new artists and writers and poets that I was meeting, were like, I've always wanted to do that. I've always wanted to kind of break into the typewriter world, but I don't feel like there's a comfortable entry point for me. All right, cool. Let's see if we can make that happen. So that's part of what I did with giving away the typewriters, was essentially just redistributing them, because I did not want, and it's still part of my pricing policy now, is that, there can be kind of an amount of gatekeeping in this, because there are some collectors where money's not an issue for them. So that can kind of be a barrier. Finances can be a barrier for some folks to be able to get into this. So my pricing structure, especially for my basic machines, has always been centered around accessibility. I have lots of friends, part of that coalition I had mentioned earlier of typewriter mechanics that I formed over the pandemic. A lot of them are able to make like a through and through, like this is their job. They quit their other jobs and this is what they do exclusively now. And I think that's fantastic. And would I love to be able to do just that? I mean, this is my full-time gig, but like, we're not making the same amount of money. But would I love to do that? Absolutely. But the thing that I love about the Iron Fox, before I started doing this, my family and I, my wife and I, we owned a food truck and a small bistro. And we came from like the restaurant business. It is very difficult to make a profit in the restaurant business. So in turn, it becomes even more difficult to run a business by your core values. The thing that I've absolutely embraced, I mean, I've just full on turned right into, and even like a cursory glance at our social media you'll see, is that we're able to kind of live our values and still reach an audience and still make money and still stay accessible. And I'm going to try and continue doing that as long as we possibly can.
Someone wants to be part of your coalition, how do they reach you?
So are you talking about for the BIPOC coalition?
The one that you've
email.
Basically forming.
Yeah, email. Email. If it's filled with just people, people all over the race spectrum and the gender spectrum. I mean, it's not, the whole point is inclusivity. So reach out. I've got a page on the website where there are a bunch of featured members that are part of the coalition, and it's really nice. Not everybody checks in all the time, but we do all check in on one another, especially like going through the pandemic and everything. And we generally boost one another. That's the whole point, is that if I have inroads to a community that you don't, okay, well, come on, we're going. You know what I mean? Like, there's no, we're just trying to eliminate those barriers where you can creatively and, if it is a business venture, then, financially be your most successful. And if you need me or somebody else or whatever the situation is, if one of us can provide a boost to the other, I think that's a fantastic thing. I mean, that's sort of that community that I think that we should all strive to be a part of, to want to be a part of.
And before you mentioned, it wasn't the first typewriter, but the second one, when the Cupid arrow hit you.
Yes.
And you went, okay. So let me ask you, I mean, notice just in the display, there's a plethora of brands there. Underwood, Smith Corona. My own personal experience is Burroughs and Smith Corona, Royal and IBM. They each have their own characteristics, and which ones from a customization and repair aspect present to you the least challenge and the biggest challenge?
So I'm going to stick with least challenge first.
Okay.
Because anytime that I get to brag on my favorite brand of machines, I'll take it. And if you pay attention to our social media, it's pretty obvious to see that I favor Smith Coronas. I just think that the second machine that I bought that I just absolutely bonded over was a 1963 Smith Corona Sterling. And it's a particular Sterling. It's one of the last great Sterlings that they made. And they only made it for a couple of years in the early 60s. It's what collectors and enthusiasts will refer to as the 5AX series. And that refers to the serial number. But I mean, you can see in the body style there, it's different. It's like mod without being over the top. It's very early 60s colors on all of them, which is neat if you appreciate that sort of thing. But overall, for me, it is partially aesthetic, but it's also practical too. Everything about the way that it works is fantastic. If you have to do any kind of repair, there's nothing about it where that in my experience where I've ever thrown up my hands and been like, I'm done. I don't think that this is something I want to do anymore. I think that it was very thoughtful and intuitive the way that they designed. And I'll say throughout Smith Corona's history, that was sort of a mainstay for them, was that there was nothing that was ever so overly complicated that you were like, I got to abandon this. I got to walk away. Customization-wise, I feel the same way. There's a lot to love there. There were times, I mean, especially when you get into the 70s, but everybody kind of threw out the rule book in the 70s. Everything got boxy. And there are some machines from that era that people they won't take a second look at because it's angular, it's boxy, it just, hey, I'm from the 70s. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you look at that thing and it says, there should be shag carpet somewhere inside there, And, but I tell you, in doing that, you limit yourself. Smith Corona made some great machines in that era. They made the Classic 12 and the Galaxy 1 and 2. Those are great machines. They're probably on par with my favorite, the Sterling from the early 60s. The only difference is that the Sterling from the early 60s is smaller, lighter, and has rounded edges. The Classic 12s and the Galaxies, they're bigger, heavier, and more angular. They're not really meant to be portable, even though they were marketed that way. But they are sturdy, fantastic machines. They're great. And it's a shame that people will overlook those because they're real workhorses. I would say the more and this is just my experience, and I know a lot of my colleagues and other mechanics may feel differently, but I've felt that personally in my experience, the more I spend on a machine to source it for something that I've never had before but I'm interested in, something that I'm like, this is like a bucket list item for me. The more I spend on one of those bucket list items, the less I end up liking it. And I don't think it's necessarily that I've got a preformed bias because I really, really wanted it, But once I get it in front of me, I'm like, this was a product of marketing. This wasn't a product of practicality. This was absolutely 100% marketing. Yeah, I'm just gonna say it. That's the way I feel about Hermes machines, which for some folks that may be, listening or watching this may be like a record scratch or mic drop moment. But I honestly do. I just think that there's so much marketing. Hermes aesthetically, they're really pretty to look at. Of a certain era, the keys, most people refer to them as marshmallow style keys because that's kind of what they look like. But they're this really, really pretty mint color. And then the machines are also a shade of that mint color. And style-wise, they're very cool. They went from rounded edges in the 50s and 60s into something more angular as you got into the 70s and 80s. But it always screams style and cool no matter what era it's from. But I haven't encountered one yet that I think is worth the prices. You can go on anywhere, and you can go to a legitimate mechanic website and look. Or you can go on, eBay, which the prices are overinflated anyway. But you'll see that as long as it says Hermes, you're going to spend multiple $100s on it, whether it's serviced or not, just because people are so amped up on that. Mm-hmm. Hemingway famously used a Hermes baby, and so you'll get a lot of people that fall into that sort of romantic, over-romanticized, hole, and they come out the other end being like, well, Hemingway used the Hermes baby. That's the machine for me. I gotta tell you, I overspent on the first one that I ever bought and sold. I fixed it because it arrived broken. I fixed it and sold it within a month because I was like hype.
You mentioned the fixing,
yeah,
and you also touched on the customization.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that I wanted to explore just for a second. Because I don't get that they happen simultaneously. When did it become apparent that you could augment them by giving them custom paint jobs and by really babying them to that extent that you can see the original typewriter there, but it's like, wow, what did he do? Send it to the car shop for a bake job?
And that's the point. That right there, that last part is what you hit on. I think it's a matter of so the online typewriter community, I don't know if I mentioned this or not, is commonly referred to as the Typosphere. I'm not 100% certain on who coined that term, but I know that it was most famously put out there by a typewriter collector and expert called Richard Pohl. And so that's what they refer to it, what typewriter nerds refer to it online as the Typosphere. And so to many in the Typosphere, they get into it because they like the antiquity of it. So if you're going to do anything to it, they prefer restoration. If that's your gig, that's cool. I think no problem. That's not. I don't do full restoration work. I don't do historically accurate restoration work. That's not what makes me tick. I like making something that it was all like I didn't all I did was fix it. You know what I mean? I didn't make it. I didn't design it. I didn't make it. I just fixed it. I made it work. And I hate that aesthetic would be a barrier. And it is. When I tell you, it all started with one particular customer. I sold her. She was from Florida. She's a poet. She's super awesome. And I sold her just a perfect 5 Series Sterling from the 50s. And I mean, it was mint. It was beautiful. And I didn't hear from her for probably about 2 months. And then she commented on one of my posts saying, oh yeah, I'd love to use my typewriter more, but it's too heavy. So I messaged her. I said, Sierra, what's the deal? You don't like it? Because in my mind, I'm like, this is why bother writing on anything else? This one's perfect. And she said to me, she goes, it's too heavy to lug around, and honestly, it's just ugly. And at first, the traditional part of my heart broke. It's like, oh, it's not ugly. How could you call it ugly? But then I took a look at it. I changed my point of view. I changed my perspective, and I'm like, it is ugly. it is an ugly brown color. It's not even an appealing brown color. It's just, it doesn't matter how well you clean it. The original color was ugly. And then so you step back and you start objectively looking at the rest of, the inventory that you have. And you're like, yeah, a lot of this is really ugly. There's a lot of, just drab colors that maybe spoke to a sense of propriety for the times. But now that it's not a thing that, it's a leisure item now. You know what I mean? It's not a necessity. So now that it's a leisure item, it should be able to reflect the times and reflect the people that are looking to use them. And being able to just skew my perspective on that changed things entirely for me. And so I said, look, here's another machine that I have. It's smaller and lighter. It's what they call an ultra portable. It's meant to be taken on the go with you. Send me back that one that you have, all right? And you're gonna be my test subject. Give me a color. And so that was the first one I did. And she absolutely fell in love with it. She uses it all the time now. Tags me in everything, and that was probably about 2 years ago. And, and from there, I kind of started doing a deep dive into how to, because a lot of folks that talk about customization, they will spray directly over what's there. Why? Why? The minute you bump that thing, it's going to chip, and then the new paint's going to come off, and then the old paint's going to come off, and you're getting all the old textures and all the other things. If you're going to do it, anything that's worth doing is worth doing well. So I started going through the steps and teaching myself how to properly strip paint off, apply new paint. Okay, I learned how to do that. Oh, that looks cool. Let's try that. That's a completely new, different type of paint and a new method. And, so I'm always growing, and I'm always evolving, and I'm always looking to do something different. I did, for one woman, I did a little ultra portable Smith Corona Skywriter, and she said she wanted these two colors, and she wanted a band of leopard print in those two colors throughout the whole machine. And so I did that for her, and she loved it. I thought it came out fantastic. I surprised myself because it was really a challenge. I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it or not. And then from there, it just kind of sparks a love. Anytime I start to feel like creative, now I'll source machines that may be mechanically sound, but are just ugly as all sin on the outside, because I know I'm going to strip the paint off that, and I'm going to turn it into something that, someone's going to love immensely. And I really like being able to do that. And the added bonus is it's now a one-of-a-kind art piece on top of being a functional antique. It is now a one-of-a-kind art piece. There's not another one like it in the world.
But still, there are purists who will look at
Oh, yeah.
Who will look at that and say,
yes,
what did you do? This is a candy-colored typewriter. We didn't have them that way.
I have had it's never directly on the stuff that I post. It's generally by way of. So if someone shares one of my things in a typewriter group, because I don't go under Iron Fox on any of the groups. I just go by my name. And if you know me, you know me. And if you don't, even better. And so, I'm sometimes unfortunately privy to that kind of thing where, people will just tear it apart. And I'm like, look, it's not for you, and that's okay. It's literally not for you. It was for this person that I sold it to, and they're immensely happy with it. So have a good day. I don't know what to tell you. Move along, This is something that would have ended up in a trash heap somewhere if I didn't take it and do this with it. And now somebody uses it and loves it. Just be happy that people are typing, right? That's what's going to keep us going with this.
Ian, you've been through several starts as an entrepreneur.
Accurate.
Have you found a home now?
I hope so. Yeah,
Is this where you live now?
I would say so. Would I have to supplement it? Probably at some point. Unless, that's why I try never to be a one-trick pony, which is why I started customizing, which is why I started trying, there's obviously a want for people in whatever your poison is, whatever it is that makes you giddy and fanish, right? We've all got that thing. For some people, it's classic cars. They want to be able to wear classic car t-shirts or have stickers or, whatever it is, hats, you name it, whatever it is. people that just want to be able to fully immerse themselves in the things that make them happy. And there's a big gaping void for people that want to openly wear their appreciation of just analog lifestyle, is what I like to call it. Because I don't want to limit it to one thing. Generally, if you've got somebody who takes an interest in something analog like typing, that person's, all you have to do is say, hey, have you ever used a fountain pen? And boy, you've just opened up a half-hour conversation into fountain pens. 8 times out of 10, that is a guarantee. Or, hey, it's wild. My uncle just gave me a bunch of records. All right, you've opened up a new can of worms. Like, there's never just one thing. There's always an overlap. So, that's an area that I'm trying to a space that I'm trying to occupy as well. In living my values, obviously, I've got sort of my borrowing from famously Woody Guthrie, this machine kills fascists, and that is a message that I'm super psyched about. Because of the cost of shipping things, obviously, I don't generally ship machines internationally, especially if it's a custom or something like that, because once it leaves my hands, it's left my hands, and I put a lot of time and energy. I'm sending one of my kids off into the world, and it's a lot to trust shipping internationally. But my merch, I'll ship anywhere. And the amount of countries that I have shipped my stickers to, because all my stickers, and basically this right here, the logo, is the only piece of artwork that isn't an Ian McAndrew original. So all of my stickers and everything else, that's all me. So it's another way for me to sort of purge my creativity. It's resonating with folks because I've had a lot of people from many other countries buy just my stickers, buy t-shirts, the messenger bags that I sell, all those other things. And, on one hand, bittersweet yay of capitalism. I've made a little bit of money, but just the absolute wonder that I put these messages out into the world. I put these images, I put this art, this work. I put these little pieces of me out into the world. And isn't that validating that it resonated with someone so much that they ordered it from a completely other a total other country, and they're willing to wait for it to come to them, to be shipped to them, and then inevitably they'll tag me on social media wherever they've stuck it up or worn it or whatever, and that's a fantastic feeling. I've never published anything, so I couldn't necessarily liken it to that, but I hope that's sort of a similar feeling, that someone who's published something and people come in saying, hey, I read your book and it was fantastic. I didn't just, I bought it. That's how much I loved it. It's a great feeling. It really is. It's not as fulfilling as being a dad, but it's pretty good.
Ian McAndrew of Lacey, typewriter maven, visible online, and you can see us displayed throughout October at the Ocean County Library Barnegat branch. Thank you for joining us. Keep up with our programs and events at theoceancountylibrary.org. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check our 6 Spotify platforms and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and Snapchat. Keep learning. Keep growing.